Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Whiteboard Wednesdays. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the Regional Vice President of Business Development for Track by G2 Crowd. Little one-liner on us, we are a way for CFOs and CIOs to spring clean their tech stack. So figure out the SaaS that their team isn't using, figure out the SaaS maybe they were oversold licenses and can scale back. The SaaS that has redundant functionality, shadow IT, unauthorized apps, basically a way for them to consolidate all of their applications down to what their team needs and actually uses. A little bit on today's session. Today I wanted to cover the 5 ways that you can turn an SDR into an AE before they're asking for a promotion. So I know that's a hot topic in the sales development community. The SDRs want to become an AE. Oftentimes, they spend a year and a half, maybe up to 2 or even 3 years in sales development. And after all of that long grind and setting appointments, they want to turn into a closer. But oftentimes what we see is at the end of that time, they've gotten really good at how to prospect, but not really good at how to close and go into the next function. So today I wanted to cover the 5 ways that I'm turning my SDRs into prospective closers, so that turns it into a pool for my AE team to draw on in terms of hiring. So without further ado, let's kick it off. The first way, at a baseline level, I'm always viewing my closer or my SDRs as transactional AEs. So my background, I was an AE and an enterprise AE in my past life, and then came into the Bay Area and decided to be an SDR just to understand the ecosystem of tech. And so I always viewed my SDR role as I am closing here, but what I'm closing is an appointment as opposed to some kind of deal. So getting a signature on the dotted line. So that's just kind of a framework of how to view your SDRs, that this isn't a nascent role that doesn't need training, that isn't very difficult. This is the hardest part of the pipe for a lot of people. And so, a lot of attention needs to be paid to the SDR and how to turn them into a skilled assassin on how to prospect. So the first piece of how I get them thinking like an AE before they are ready for a promotion is through comp structure. So I think if you asked any account executive or any VP of sales, they would tell you that all appointments aren't created equally. And I completely agree with that. So a lot of different things can go into an appointment on whether it's going to turn into a deal and what size deal that's going to turn into. And so the 2 outlets that I've seen SDR programs turn to is they measure their SDRs on either one of 2 things or an amalgam of both. Number 1 being the volume of appointments that the SDR sets. They'll put a bar of this is the kind of person that we want to talk to, anything over that, and it's going to be acceptable. And then the second piece is the amount of revenue that is influenced on the close. So how much revenue happened as a result of that appointment. So those are the 2 ways that I typically see SDR departments measuring on. But when I came to that, I was trying to understand from a sales an SDR perspective, if I'm coming to an organization I'm trying to break in, and let's say that my buyer persona is within finance. If it is the same amount of money and the same amount of credit to me to book a CFO as it is a director of finance, as it is a finance intern, if I'm smart and I'm an intuitive thinking sales dev rep, then I'm going to book the one that closes the quickest. So that would be the intern. So that's obviously really great for the SDR, not very great for your AE. So the comp structure that I put together, and this could be a whole Whiteboard Wednesday in and of itself, but just a brief overview so that you, can get a little tidbit into it. I usually do a point system on outbound. So the top part of this grid matrix here, I like to put whatever you charge based on, I like to lump it into 3 groups of potential sale. So for instance, over here at G2 Track, we charge based on employee size of the organization. So I would say there are 3 different categories here: SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. And our employee threshold would be 0 to 200 here, 200 to, let's say, 800 here, and 800 plus is enterprise. So these are the top 3 buckets of what size of organization, what is the size of the potential sale to the AE if I were to pass this appointment through. The second one over here, and I've never seen this deployed at another organization, but a lot of people think that BANT is the only thing that should be in the qualification metrics of like, is this qualified based on, does the person have budget, authority, is there a need, and what's the timeline on there? But I've never seen someone address what is the level of the title of the person in the room. So this is what I've deployed at my past 2 programs of, let's say, up here is C-level, CXO. Up here, this mid-matrix could be head of or director level. And then down here is senior manager, and let's say even an individual contributor. So you can play around with whatever these are. It doesn't matter to me so much as which pieces go into which one of these grid boxes, but more so that you have an infrastructure to where your SDRs are starting to think about what is the quality of this appointment and who do I want to hunt after. So the quickest way to get influence over the SDR team is to tie their comp to something that's more relevant for you. So I've done here in the past of maybe this is a point system, so you get 1 point here, 2 and 3, 2, 3 and 4, and 3, 4, and 5. I mean, again, these values you can play with of what these values are up here, over on the side, or even for the point system themselves. But you want to get your SDR thinking, okay, I can hunt a senior manager at an SMB company. I definitely can close this person. This person's much easier for me, but I'm not going to get as much credit as if I go after a CXO at an enterprise company. So that gets them thinking the type of appointment or what happens to this appointment actually matters to me as an SDR. It doesn't, I don't have to necessarily establish budget, and I don't have to establish the need. That can be on the AE, but I need to be hunting the kinds of people that helps my AEs close. And so, how I've sung sales departments to sleep a little bit in the past is saying like, okay, my SDRs are going to get a little credit for this kind of appointment, but they're not going to get much. So the first piece that is really influential over an SDR team into getting them thinking like an AE is getting them thinking that all appointments aren't created equally, and doing that through the comp structure that you've deployed. So without further ado, let's go into number 2. Number 2 is webinar. So in the past, you're going to have a lot of people coming in through your inbound line. Some of them are prospective buyers that you really want to spend time with. Some of them are a little bit questionable on whether you want to spend an AE's calendar on this person, and some flat out either aren't the right size company, aren't the right size, aren't the level of role that you're looking for, or are just an intern or someone who's really, really interested in your product. So from my perspective, I still want those kind of buyers to know about my product, but I don't want to spend a ton of time of my AE's calendar on these people individually. So typically through the inbound line, if I have someone coming through that I absolutely know is not quote unquote qualified to me as a buyer, then I put them into every 2 weeks I will have a product webinar where basically they can come, they can sit down, they can understand G2 track overall, but the AE doesn't have to spend a lot of time on these prospects one-on-one. So for this webinar, how I've used it in the context of turning my SDRs into AEs is when I have a senior level SDR, when I have someone who really wants to move up in the ranks, someone who is skilled, knows our product a little bit, I train them and I have them pitch to me of what they would do in an average closing call, and I have them practice on this webinar. So basically, in comes the SDR, they pitch the product at a high level. It gives them a great opportunity to practice on some actual prospects that might buy, but these aren't super high valuable prospects to my company. So the second piece, I would just have an SDR go into that webinar, if they're trained, if they've pitched to you and you're comfortable that they can pitch the product overall, They pitch the product to a bunch of prospects, that maybe fall outside of your ICP. And then at the end, as a CTA of the webinar, I have them say, if anyone is interested in pricing, if anyone is looking to buy this product, ping me one off. So it can surface up a bunch of buyers who actually do have the budget and do have the authority to make the decision without wasting any of the time on the account executives. The third piece, and I'm going to get a lot of hums and haws here, because if there was top two things that were the Becc Holland classics, it is comp structure and personalized messaging. So I'm a big fan of personalized messaging. In the past, I've taken my programs from, I had SDRs that were doing 100 calls and 50 emails per day, and I cut them down to about 10 emails and 25 calls per day. So what I was mirroring there, and again, I'm an account executive at heart. So I'm someone who has closed deals. I'm someone who has, been a full cycle AE and also been on the prospecting end. And what I was really confused about whenever I came into the sales development world was why so many people were mass blasting. So I think there's a very finite time and place for mass blasting. If you're just getting off the ground as an organization, if you want some brand awareness, if you want a little bit of tilt of the market and you're not worried about damaging your TAM, your total available market, then I think that's a good time to kind of scoop up some low-hanging fruit and send out, some batch and blast templates to your market. But as far as building rapport with your prospects, you're asking your sales development reps to strike up a relationship out of thin air, and typically it's with someone who's an executive level. So this is a vice president, this is C-level. If your organization is paying, expensive salary to an SDR, it's typically to talk to a buyer that has very, very little time and has spent a lot of time in their career kind of notching up and improving their skill set. So how to build rapport with them is through research and through being very, very appropriately aggressive, with the amount of knowledge that you know about the person walking into the room. So if you ask any account executive, or the majority of account executives, I don't want to speak for all, I've yet to come across an account executive who mass blasts, who says okay, this is an actual strategy. I remember that I was, at an event, this was probably a year back, and I asked someone, I said, okay, how is your account executive team prospecting? He said, oh, they're doing one-to-one, very strategic. And I said, how does your SDR team prospect? And he said, he kind of fluttered a little bit, and I said, you can say it, they mass blast. And he said, yeah, they mass blast. And I asked him the question, and he couldn't answer it then, and he told me a week ago that he still can't answer it now, of why those are different approaches. So if you want to garner respect with your prospect, if you really want to earn their time and earn their attention, then you want to have very structured and hit tenets of a message, which is how I run it on my teams, but a very personalized messaging of there's nothing worse than getting a carpet bomb of someone that you don't know asking for your time. So this gets them really thinking like an account executive of, if I were to take this deal further in the stages, then I can't sacrifice coming off in a certain way that I don't know you and I don't respect you right off the bat through a carpet bomb. So getting them to think like an account executive is getting them to think very strategically about who they're hunting and about what they're saying to that person whenever they are getting in front of them, whatever channel that is, whether that's LinkedIn, over the phone, over email, events, etc. Point number 4. Listening to calls. So a lot of SDRs, whenever they come into a program, they really they look up to the AEs. They want to become the AEs one day. And so a big way that they can do that is by hearing what an AE is saying on the phone. I've seen this in the past of, let me send my SDR out to shadow my AE and let me bring them, on the call with me. And it's kind of an awkward introduction, and we have an extra body in the room. And the prospect's really thinking, am I being scammed over here because this AE is teaching this SDR how to prospect me? And so it makes it a little forced interaction. So the other piece being, you want to know what your AEs are saying overall in aggregate. You want to know on average for an SMB deal or a general business deal or an enterprise deal, what are they saying on average How are they pivoting against competitors? What are they saying in the nascent stages of the call? And so to do all of that, there's a couple of different options out there in the market, and I have no opinion being G2 Crowd on who's the best. However, there are a few people out there who can record your AE calls and then can put them in a nice library so that you can have your SDRs listen to what these account executives are saying on average. The other piece is you want your SDRs listening to the calls that they are setting. So you want them to understand, from a base level, I set this appointment, and is it qualified, and is it not qualified, or is it going well, and if it's going well, why? So that I can hunt future business and mirror it to that whatever was qualified or whatever went super well. I can mirror my future calls and prospecting strategy accordingly. So the fourth piece here is to have your SDRs listen to, in aggregate, what is going on during the AE demos once they pass through the lead. And then the fifth and final piece, and I'm sure you can guess it, of how to turn your SDR into an AE, and this is the piece that I see done typically pretty well with an organization. It's kind of like a last-ditch effort on some organizations of how do I get my SDRs to be saying better things through training. So my only advice here would be, I see a lot of programs, they don't take training on an ongoing basis very seriously, so they bring in an outsourced trainer, for one session. But, in my experience, you want your managers to be very, very trained so that they can pass over all of that wonderful training to SDRs. So bringing someone on site, it's really helpful. They'll give you some insights. They'll give you some better ways to have conversations. But if you don't have the reinforcement of the SDR manager who lives, breathes, and knows this training super well, that's the person who's on site with your SDRs day to day to day. And so you want to make sure that your SDR managers, above all, are trained on the material so that they can have a lot of reinforcement follow-up sessions with the SDRs on the daily. But viewing this as an SDR isn't someone who's just an appointment setter. An SDR is someone who wants to be having a conversation in a way that's provoking and that pushes urgency to your buyer. So if you train super well, my goal was always, at the end of the tenure of my sales development reps, and they transition over into an SMB AE or a mid-market AE, I wanted them to be outrunning my current AEs that were within the program. So where I'd focus very heavily, usually in the past I've spent about 70% of my time on training, of sitting down with these SDRs, on a daily and weekly basis and helping them influx different techniques of how to have a conversation the best way for your prospects, to tease out the information that you need, and also to turn them into a strategic closer who's thinking about what happens after the conversation that they have. So that's it. In review, the top 5 ways to turn them into an AE before they're asking you for a promotion is comp structure, have them run some webinars, have them do personalized messaging, have them listen to all the calls that your AEs are having with all that rich information, and then also make a serious effort to have them be trained. If you're interested in learning more about this topic or topics like this, I'm running a free 5-session series at the G2 Crowd building at 343 Sansom Street in San Francisco. If you want to register for those, go to learn.g2crowd.com/flipthescript. But also, more importantly, I'm excited to announce that on August 23rd, I'm going to be speaking at the Sales Development Conference. So if you want to come and hear what industry leaders are saying about topics like this, or what I'm going to be saying about it, go to tenbound.com/conference to register. Thanks for having me.